So my name is Nat. It's my first time speaking and being at 4C, so very happy to be with you here today. I work for the Finnish company Rovio, and you may know us from creating the Angry Birds titles. But I work in the Battle Studio, where I support a different kind of game.
Enter battle.
Yeah, so Battle Bay is a 5v5 mobile, and I'm working with it for a year now. Something I have to say is that we don't have all the answers. However, I'm here today to share with you what has worked best for us in working strong bonds with our players, and I hope I can at least give you or confirm some ideas for you to take away. Here's a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about mainly. Three things. So why making community part of the development process, some communication platforms and tools that we use, and the main part is how do we form those strong bonds with our players. Quick professional background facts about myself. I'm in the gaming industry for over 10 years now, 8 of those in Blizzard Entertainment, since September 2017 with Rovio, and my age, we'll see. Maybe you find out. Now in the game, I'm known as the Grim Repair. That's I play a fixer, that's a support chip. And the picture was actually created by one of our YouTubers for me during a live Q&A. We are actually a fairly small team. We're 14 developers, including myself. So I sit with the development team. Oh, wow, loud. And developer means everyone who actively works on the game. I also mainly live in the game, in the forums, on Discord, and a lot of coffee. I only had 2 today, so still waking up. Now, the question of why making community part of the development process. It's something that the Battle Bay team actually decided early on to focus on in their development process, thinking about community and what they would need to be supported and keeping that player-centric mindset. So the most interesting reasons I would like to share with you are that in competitive gaming, community is a cornerstone of the game. Also, forging strong bonds with the community as a developer team enabled us to gain an array of benefits to improve our game along the way. And finally, by knowing our players, we can engage on pain points very early on, and we can also anticipate and create a better overall experience for them. It's also interesting to note that the vocal part of our community is about 10% of our active players, and what they feel and talk about really influences the perception of the game externally as well as internally and other players. Now, focusing on creating a strong community bond enabled the game team to build, learn, and improve the player experience. These are a few highlights of the top benefits. So for example, if you read the bottom row from left to right, we can spread important information from within the community much more effectively. We gain special insights into what players really feel and truly care about, and by sharing in their passion on a day-to-day basis, we can improve our game along the way. Now, some words on tools and communication platforms. You will be familiar with all of these, and we are present on all of those communication platforms. However, we decided to interact and focus on only one of them, our BattleBay forums. Now, I listen into whatever our players say on every other platform. However, on the forums is where we spread the main source of information. It's where the developers directly interact with our players, and it's also where we have our main game announcements, such as the patch notes. Something also to know is that we have several in-game chats. We have global chat, guild chat, private chat, and how we moderate those is by having a moderation crew. We also have, we use an external tool called Community Sift, which is automated chat filtering. And our guild leaders are actually responsible for their own guild management. What we have is our own community tools suite. That was built by our own developer, and it, for example, our moderator crew, they have access to a range of moderation tools. We also have an inbox global messaging system that can also be targeted towards, for example, IP-specific users, for Android or iOS users, or pretty much tailored towards any player data that we have. Something really cool is that we can also share, players can share, we can share replays of all and any of their matches. And we can also internally analyze and investigate on every single match that has ever been played in the game. And last but not least, we can also share individually or en masse items and currency in the game. So how do we form these strong bonds with our players? First of all, I set out on a quest to understand who our battlers are. Now, this is supposed to represent a star cluster. Bear with me, it will make sense. Earlier, I mentioned how the vocal part of our community influences all the others. And there are many influencing voices in our player universe. So by listening in-game, on the forums, on Discord, I started grouping them. I wanted to find out the groups or clusters where the players are that have the most impact on others in terms of feeling or opinion, so with the aim that I could then in turn have the best positive influence over our community. And that meant I had to get in touch with all of them by playing with them, being accessible 24/7, answering questions, hanging out in game chats, and simply showing that I care and am available for them. So the cluster groups that I've found that have the most influence are guild leaders, active forum members, our FB page, various Discord groups, and our influencers. And what I mean by that is any player that is held in high regard in our community. And finally, our YouTubers, our dedicated content creators. So by getting to know who and how they all are, I could communicate on a much more personal level and still remain genuine myself and share little things about each other, like our favorite pizza or game strategy, or just general discussion about how healers are always blamed when someone dies. Oops, one to lift. But anyway, I pretty much in short had to earn their respect and trust of our community. So, how did I build the crew? I asked myself, how do I actually explain my tactics of how do I form these strong bonds? And I figured that I use 4 main mechanics. I listen, I interact, I inspire, and then I empower. So, firstly, I listened and observed a lot for an entire month on all the previous communication platforms that I shared with you, day and night. And once I knew who interacts and listens to who writes very in-depth and supportive game guides, who are the top players but aren't really vocal, but they give private advice or just create really cool YouTube game guides, I started forging trusting relationships with those most influential players. Now, I believe that trust firstly has to be built by giving it. So it took me that 1 month to build our first MVP crew. And those are the most valuable players or posters in our forums. And then it took me 6 months to build our moderator crew in game, so mods for short, because with great power comes really great responsibility. My MVPs and my mods are my most important and trusted touch groups to this day. And when building our crew in Battle Bay, I followed these very simple principles. Keeping it small and manageable, providing proper coverage, because most of our active players are in the US and we're based in Finland. And then also finally to make it scalable. So these principles and the initial trust-building relationships, that is applicable to smaller to larger communities. Now, the third part, as you can see, is the devs. They're at the heart of the game, and it's also where I operate from. So they're part of our crew. So besides just listening in, I also wanted more specific data. What I wanted was to find a way to measure and improve our community culture. How would I know where to prioritize any improvements and measure their success if I had no clear indicators? So together with our user researcher, I created a pulse survey to understand why culture is so important. We found that in team-based multiplayer games, other players impact the game experience considerably. Also, the game experience is influenced by the existing social culture in the game, and it impacts how the community communicates and treats each other. So we aim to measure a few key indicators, like toxicity and positivity, retention, safety and support, and community self-monitoring, in order to understand the player perception and come up with actionable items after our analysis. So we devised a questionnaire via SurveyMonkey, sent it with a pop-up message in game and a link, and running it for 72 hours. Each question was posed on a 5-point scale, ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And we, for example, asked questions like how valuable players feel our in-game chats are, how important it is for them to even meet other people, how much they enjoy our current social atmosphere in Battle Bay, or their perception of Battle Bay developers caring about the community. Now, I can't share exact numbers, but our most notable findings were that most players feel that a friendly environment is important, and devs acting more on negative interactions. So that means I could now much more effectively engage. By the way, we also found retention factors. For instance, that there is a direct correlation between players that perceive a community more positively and playing more. Now, together with listening and my community pulse results, I started to understand the mindset of our battlers and crystallized from there our own culture, our attitude, and our identity. Knowing that enabled me to start inspiring everyone. And with that also holding people more accountable and letting everyone know what we're all about. We understood that the community pulse survey showed us that the perception of the community could be much more friendly, so I wanted to change that. For actions to make sense, I needed a framework. And this is how our fair play rules Battle with Pride came to life. It's our code of conduct. It was a clear set of rules and guidelines, as well as consequences showing what is acceptable behavior and what isn't. And we shared them as a permanent in-game message in our inbox, as well as a main announcement on our official forums. And only by providing these clear guidelines could we establish a sense of right and wrong, of safety and protection, and fairness. And especially fairness is a factor that is really essential to competitive gamers. And it's one of the most challenging areas we're still working on. Now, I learned that a healthy community is of course centered around the people being part of it, but also us, the ones nurturing it. And I learned that leading by example especially positive example, has an impact on players and how they behave. So when I use positive behavior, they would respond in kind. For example, our forums were rampant with quite disrespectful behavior, conversations going way off topic, and so I started to spread the rule of always be friendly and constructive. Super simple to follow. That only worked while I was starting to heavily moderate threads and comments that were not. And slowly people would change their behavior. I also encouraged people that were very constructive by joining and commenting on their discussions. Also, our developers would only comment on constructive threads. And finally, I rewarded MVP status to those players who would demonstrate our battle with pride attitude the most, and hence creating more and more positive advocates. Now, without taking action, rules become meaningless. So the first months were really tough. We had to moderate a lot and show our presence day and night. But now we're at a stage where our community is pretty much keeping each other in check. And I can just concentrate on purely giving information or joining discussions without having to be so hands-on. A very clear takeaway from the community survey was that our actions had to be much more visible. And I think these are shared overall less. So I wanted to share an example with you today of how we form strong bonds through a more negative experience. One of the rules that we have is never name and shame. So this is why it was extra impactful on our community when we had to permanently ban 200 player accounts, of which many were prominent community members. So what happened was that we uncovered several players used a third-party service to gain large amounts of in-game hard currency. And what many players were not entirely aware of is that those third parties only got the currency by committing systematic refund fraud in the app stores, circumventing even Google's and Apple's own refund rules. So what we could get at through our own data is what happened, but what we could not quite understand is why or how these scammers specifically operate. So I decided to approach some of those main buyers who were also part of our top global guilds very directly and honestly. What had happened? Now, because of our good relationship, they divulged tons of detailed information to me, even though their accounts had been irrevocably locked. So what we found is that scammers target players on Discord and told that they could buy cheaper in-game currency because they lived in developing countries, and you only had to allow them to log into their account once and they would make the purchases. So what we figured is that most players were just not aware enough. So we focused on messaging and putting our emphasis on a clear awareness message. We emphasized on account security, how scammers operate, and to always flag anything fishy to us first before falling down a trap. We communicated this, as you can see on the picture, as an in-game inbox message, and also on all our other channels, as well as an important forum notice. After that, of course, there was a lot of talk in the community, and I had many, many follow-up discussions. Here you can see some of our ClickSense data. It shows IAP refunds from Android. And here you can see at the end there's a very sharp dip after our communication went out. An interesting fact, by the way, is that about 2 weeks later, Fortnite also came up with such an awareness notice. So we all believe that this is an extremely important issue in the industry. Now, one other valuable, visible improvement that we made to the game was to add the in-game moderator crew. They play a big part in making our community feel like a safer and friendlier place to be. They're avid and knowledgeable gamers who help with acting on any kind of spam that our own filters do not catch or harassment cases. They also help with new players. They're answering questions, provide tons of best practices, steering chat towards very constructive discussion, and just overall elevate the mood. Moderators, MVPs, and myself are in an active Discord group chat every day. Now, I've mentioned advocates. What that means is I engaged and contacted all players who would, for instance, create well-written and extensive game guides, share very constructive and specific feedback, encourage upbeat and focused conversation, and also possess the ability to calmly diffuse heated situations. Another aim I set out with is to foster a player-driven community. So I put those advocates in charge. They run our main Discord channels. They are the MVPs and moderators. They run our Reddit page because they're well-respected community members. Through them is also my best way to spread our main information from within the community itself. It's much more powerful that way. Now, as you probably might know, sometimes the most passionate players are also being the most critical with your game. Now, let me show you a little story. So, for example, we had a player who is in one of our top guilds, really renowned battler, very well respected, but in the forums he was commenting extremely negatively on any thread. So I just started a private chat with him, where I wanted to figure out where is he coming from. And we had an actual very good conversation about game or guild features that he felt very strongly about. And I said, that's exactly the kind of talk, that I would like you to share in the forums. And that's the battler that others respect. So I tried to appeal to his sense of pride. I also explained and shared a few things of how we work as developers. And in sharing something just between me and him, we slowly understood each other. Now, based on my chat with him, I added a specific feedback and suggestion forum, where him and others can now focus their feedback. And now they also drive some of the best conversations that we have. Last but not least, reward and recognition was really instrumental in building very deep bonds with our players. Sometimes a simple like on an idea posted, responding in a quite light-hearted manner, writing personal thank you messages, and pointing out good behavior went a very long way. I pinned very, very good posts, pointed out great examples in discussions, and I also shared many replays of players showing good behavior in-game. So with this, let's say, surprise and delight method, players felt very valued. Distilling and sharing the voice of the community is very important in creating these deeper bonds. As part of this suggestion and feedback forum, I created a specific thread dedicated to just quality of life improvements, also known as the thread of 1,000 paper cuts. So we actually sat through 100 individual such suggestions as a game team, collated them by small, medium, and large impact items, easy or hard to do, and then added what was realistic to our own backlog. And based on that player feedback, when we pointed out that we did it just because of what they had said, in the next update, they were really thrilled. Something else that we do, or I would say much of what we do, is just explain how things work. So for example, we explain matchmaking, the ELO system, how chance works in RNG, how we work as developers, how we do our balance. We sometimes even share graphs and data where we can, and we have very deep discussions with players. That kind of engagement is something that especially competitive and strategic players crave. They love our technical discussions together. We also seek out very specific feedback. For example, through forum polls or through one of our many Discord groups where we have our most dedicated players. From there, I also get my most clear feedback on, for example, our weekly events, just to understand what was most enjoyable or what was not, or which weapons feel overpowered and why. I also ask or talk a lot with our guild leaders, because they have access to a much larger audience, and that is how I get much more specific and basically feedback about how larger amounts of our players truly feel. I get this kind of feedback actually quite quickly. It's very honest and it's representative. Unlike with surveys, I can also ask a lot more details and follow-up questions. And finally, one valuable lesson that I learned is that despite my best efforts, I can't please everyone, and that is okay. Now, we decided to test the test. What that means is that when we were about to add a major change to the game, overhauling our controls, we tested this through an A/B test with new users, and for existing players, we tested through one of our events. How this worked was that we ran a week-long crazy agility event, which would enable full agility on all ships. It's one of the main stats that is gated through progression and certain item upgrades, and we planned to remove those items from the game with the next update, and simply bump up the base agility for everyone. So I took care of the qualitative data gathering through my own usual means of getting in touch with the cluster groups that I showed you. I was also equipped with a crazy Excel sheet. And what was very important is that the data would be through a range of ship users, also show various progression levels. And something very interesting was that I divided it by the beginning and end of the event impressions. They varied vastly. So the most noticeable change in opinion I got from players were that, for example, at the start, they thought, "This is terrible, I can't control my ship anymore, make it stop." And at the end they felt, "I love this, normal gameplay just feels boring now." So alongside this, I also conducted new user testing, together with one of our data analysts and user experience researchers. We created a specific A/B test build environment, invited several local players to our office. They didn't play the game before, and we gave them both versions to play, one with new controls and one with the old. We then observed them, interviewed them, and had them fill in a questionnaire. Now, together with both the qualitative and quantitative data, we found that it actually confirmed by quite a margin that the change of implementing new controls would be beneficial and well received. So guess what happened? Yeah, the community went ballistic when we implemented the new update. No matter the reasoning or rationale we provided along with it, at first they really didn't like it. Kind of just like the first reactions that we got from the event. So what we did then is, because we anticipated a certain amount of pushback, we did a few balance changes, and a couple of weeks later of playing, everything normalized again. So don't be too afraid when the first reactions are negative. And by now, actually, most players find the new controls much more enjoyable. So I learned that the community isn't always aware of what's best for them. But together with good analysis and testing, we're much more prepared to make good decisions. Engaging with content creators. So that's the fun part, I would say. This is what I think is mostly also associated with community engagement, promoting player-created content and just joining in the fun. We do that too, pretty much all the time. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that all developers play the game actively, weekly. We have our own guild. Some of us are extremely competitive and others more casual. Something we also have is Battle TV. That is a huge monitor in our studio corner, which streams players' gameplay all day long. We sometimes gather and comment on the games or just watch close games happen. And what it does for us is it really boosts our own morale. So, content creators. Currently, they're mostly active on YouTube, so I call them our YouTubers. And we have many of them, so many that our second largest Discord channel is just dedicated for them to share and coordinate each other's streams and videos. They each have, as you are aware with YouTubers as it is, they're very individual personalities, so we decided to do something cool with them. We held our first Battle Bay Invitational tournament. It was between 5 selected YouTubers and 5 invited pro players. We had a full stage prepared on water, professionally filmed the event, and we also invited 2 of the YouTubers to shoutcast it. We all had a blast together. Now, of course, most of what we do with our YouTubers is promoting content and just sharing overall hype around the game. They help grow our audience and just engage players on their own level in an entertaining way. Something else we did very recently is we gave our top YouTubers our new weapon that we were about to release, so that they could test it, they could showcase it, and they could create their own special content for players to share. Something else cool we did, I really enjoyed, was both me and our QA lead joined on separate occasion a collaborative live Q&A with our YouTubers. They really, really grilled us. And after the Q&A, we played together on live stream for 3 hours with players just joining in from the stream or joining in from within the game, and we all had fun together. And that's something I would do anytime again. So what's up next with our YouTubers? Currently, they're organizing their first own community-led tournament. And I'm really excited how it will pan out. We have 70 teams already signed up, and next week they will hold the final tournament. And that taught me that community really never sleeps. Now, to summarize on forming strong bonds with our players, I put this twofold. First, what it takes, as well as what we get out of the time and energy we spend. So what it primarily takes is a dedicated team. We have really dedicated developers. And they're essential to really enable us to reach the very ambitious goals we set in our community. And sometimes that can mean that the project lead is up at 4 a.m. answering player messages. Oops, sorry. Now, the build, learn, and improve method is something that has worked really well for us. And it also really only works because our developers are so dedicated. As a community manager, I have to be available all times. Now, that also means I do get sleep. But the fact that our developers are available on Slack all the time with me really backs me up. They solve problems or give me information that I need. Battle with Pride set the framework for a fairer and safer environment. It also takes those 4 mechanics I was talking about: learning, listening, interacting, inspiring, and empowering. A very honest and direct communication style, and especially giving a lot of trust. So what do we get in a nutshell? Is honest insights and feedback, a players for players environment. They are in charge. Fast troubleshooting, free content creation, what players really want, and last but not least, retention and highly engaged players. Now, the main takeaway for me, and what we've been striving for in Battle that I want to leave you with, is that when we're thinking of games as a service, part of that service is to put our players in the center. And what that specifically means for community engagement is to integrate it as part of your end-to-end development process, and thus providing our players with a much better overall experience. Thank you. Forgot to drink.
We have a question over there. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come around with the microphone.
Thanks for the talk. So It seems like, in your experience, giving the community what it needs to be healthy and happy and productive sort of comes at the expense of the happiness and healthiness of the community managers.
We only have me, so I'm alive and kicking.
Yeah. Do you think that there are ways to mitigate that?
I think at the start, I hope I could explain some of that. So at the start, it takes much more, let's say, induction energy. And once you have established all those methods and the relationships, it gets a lot easier. Like I sleep a lot more now. But yeah, the first 6 months, I would say, are quite tough if you join a community new. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I just want to add to that, there's a talk later today, I think in room 3, on work-life balance for community managers.
I should go there. Aha! Clever.
Okay, hi. Thanks for the interesting talk. Kimmo Kari from Finland. I'm thinking about that why not use more like automatized systems, like AI-based things that would sort similar type of questions and sort of like rate them that you see the most important ones, and if someone has been already replied, that could be sort of like automatically generated reply that, hey, look to this thread and something like that. I understood Supercell is doing this now.
You mean for
yes, for
in-game chat?
Community management to sort all the posts you have and automatically reply to obvious ones.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Supercell is much larger. They have a much larger community to deal with. So for them, that's probably making sense at that time. And for us, it makes sense with the community that we have to interact more personally. Of course, as you scale up, you can always think of other methods. So it's in the back of our minds, yes.
Hello, and thank you for that, very informative. I have a question. You said you are very active on many different platforms, but why did you focus in the end to only do it on the forum, the communication with patch notes and...
Yeah. So yeah, why just a forum? So basically that was a preference from the developers. The game is out for 2 years and I joined last year. So of course I respected that choice, but that's also where most of our organic players went. It just worked better, but you can also use Reddit. I learned that if you spread your information everywhere, it can get really confusing of where to get your feedback from. So just limiting it, at least our main interactions, let's put it this way. You can broadcast anywhere else, but actually interact just on one platform to keep it very focused. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Hello.
Hey.
How many languages do you cover today?
18.
And do you use like different community services to do that?
Nope.
It's just you?
Yeah, it's just me, and of course a few moderators. Like we have the moderators in game, but the main language that we support on forums is just English.
All right. And my second question is, what do you think? How scalable is that approach? If you have like 10 times more players in the game.
So how scalable is it? So I'm in contact with other community managers as well. So I can say that even on much larger games, that the main approach is scalable. You just interact with the top players, so the top guilds, the top YouTubers, and everything else is then you ramp up your mods that you trust, you ramp up your in-game moderators that you trust. And then of course, as said, there can also be other systems to help you with moderating a larger group. But it actually works also for games such as Clash Royale. Hey.
Hello. Could you please point out how you evaluate and define your work as a community manager in the Rovio influencing on the retention? So you mentioned that yeah, there is happy players. I make them more happy, and that correlate with the uplift in the retention. Could you give more details on that?
Yeah, so how do I know that I impact retention?
Not impact, influence.
Sorry, how do I influence it?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the most dedicated players, I mean, they're obviously there to play your game. They're not there to, be with me. But the fact that, as I said, like through that community, through that survey that we did, and we're going to do it again 9 months down the line just to compare if there were any changes, is that players actually play more when the community is healthier. So it doesn't necessarily need to be very happy, but just healthy, and that you go to a place where players will help each other and that they're there for each other. And that definitely increased our session time.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, one more question.
Sure.
I'm not honestly sure how it's nowadays the situation, but back in the days, Puzzle and Dragon they had quite different approach than many other successful mobile games. Okay, it's only very popular in Asia, but it has been the most top crossing game of globally, even though it's only big in Asia. But it's like weird that this game, it seems very simple, but it's like really, really deep and hardcore game inside. Mm-hmm. And they don't have a proper tutorial for the game. They don't explain it in the game. They don't explain the game in their own forums. But then the huge fan base, they create their own, big sort of like statistical, websites around that. Mm-hmm. So that is just like they are doing it totally in another way than most of us. So I think it's a decision from their side. And,
yes.
And have you studied about that? And what's your take on that?
So we of course looked also how do other games do it. Now you said already. I think games based in Asia, it's a different culture. So you have to also be aware of what is your main audience, and our main audience is in the US. I really like the community or the way that, for example, Arena of Valor does it. They have an honor system in game. They have quite a community self-moderated way of, liking good behavior, or the fact that you can also signal, this player wasn't part of our battle, and then they have this kind of huge honor system behind it that also then keeps players from playing if they lose these honor points. So we have been thinking of integrating something like that. I think our game would fit it, but we're not sure about the actual culture and the audience that would be as effective as it is for the Asian audience. So, but we have a large amount of research done, and we're looking always into what can we try without breaking the community as it is now.
Cool. I have a question from my side. You said that you do your moderation on a volunteer basis from the community.
Yes.
How do you ensure that you have coverage over all the time zones, and do you compensate the moderators? Yeah,
so the coverage is because they constantly play. So that's fairly easy. We have all the time zones, so Canada, US, England, what else do we have? And India as well. So we have players in India as well. So the time zones are covered, and I look at where, I can easily see where all our players are from, and I engage those where I need, I need someone in this or that time zone. But pretty much it's all about, are they playing a lot? Are they knowledgeable? Are they, trustworthy? And that's all I need on that coverage end. And I forgot the second part of your question.
Do you compensate them?
Yes. They do get some benefits. So they have, for example, the free VIP pass. It's like Battle Pass. So they get free subscription to the game. They get that daily interaction with me. And also some of our developers. So they can actually ask direct questions. And that's something that they feel much more value. They just value much higher than any monetary compensation. And it's really voluntary. So if they want to leave, they can leave, and that's okay as well.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much. It was great to be here.